my mom yelled. "You're not the child I ever wanted. You never were." I didn't argue, the first time my mother said it out loud, it wasn't even in a fight. It was a Saturday in late March, the kind that still felt like winter in the shade. The kitchen window over the sink had a hairline crack that made everything outside look slightly warped. Our neighbor's fence bowed, the bare branches curved. My mother stood beneath that window in a cream sweater that looked expensive and harmless, stirring her coffee like she was in a commercial. My Aunt Rochelle was at the island, scrolling on her phone with one long nail. My cousin Maris sat with her legs tucked under her, chewing toast. They were all half listening to me because I was the only one doing anything practical. I was tightening the bracket under the cabinet that held the microwave. The screws had loosened again. It wasn't a big repair, but the cabinet door had been hanging a little crooked for weeks, and my mother hated anything that made the house look tired. She loved that word, tired. "Hold the flashlight higher," she said without turning around. I adjusted the beam, like that. A little to the left. I moved it left. My palm was damp against the handle. The metal bracket was cold. My mother glanced over her shoulder at me, then at the phone propped beside her coffee. The screen showed her camera app open, angled toward the clean side of the kitchen. The new backsplash she'd paid for with a credit card she pretended was points. She was filming something for her Facebook page. She posted constantly. Home upgrades, recipes, Sunday resets, advice about keeping a family close. Her captions always had words like gratitude and blessed and pour into your people. I finished tightening the last screw and leaned back on my heels. The microwave looked straight now. I lowered the flashlight. My mother's eyes narrowed, not at the cabinet, at me. "You know," she said, voice light, almost amused, "sometimes I look at you and I wonder what happened." Aunt Rochelle let out a little laugh like she'd been handed the punchline early. Maris didn't look up from her toast. She was used to my mother's tone. "So was I." "What do you mean?" I asked. I kept my voice neutral. Not defensive, just polite. My mother's lips pressed into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I mean," she said, stirring her coffee again, "I expected a child with spark. Drive. Someone who understood presentation." She gestured loosely around the kitchen. "Not someone who fixes cabinets like a maintenance guy." Rochelle laughed properly this time. "Maybe he missed the gene." My mother chuckled. "Maybe." It would have been easy to say something sharp, easy to ask her who paid the mortgage while she tried to build an audience online. Easy to point out that I wasn't maintenance. I was the reason the house didn't fall apart. Easy to remind her that my job, my real job, paid for her Sunday resets. But I didn't. I stood, wiped my hands on a paper towel, and said, "Microwave straight now." My mother glanced back at her phone like I'd interrupted her. "Huh." Then she turned the camera toward herself, smile bright, voice sweet. "Okay, friends, so here's a quick tip if your cabinet starts sagging." She talked like the kitchen was hers alone, like nobody else existed. I walked out quietly, the flashlight still in my hand. Upstairs, my room was the only one without framed photos in the hallway outside it. Every other section of wall featured my mother with someone else. Friends at charity events, my cousin's graduation, her and her husband on a cruise. The only photo of me was in the living room, shoved onto a lower shelf behind a candle. I'd stopped noticing. Or at least I'd stopped reacting. That's what patience looks like when it becomes habit. I was 20 and 6 and living at home in a house I'd partly funded. People always assume that means I was dependent. The reality was more exact and less dramatic. My mother's husband, Ken, had left 2 years ago, and when he did, he took his income and his opinions with him. The mortgage didn't shrink just because he was gone. My mother couldn't afford the house on what she made doing brand partnerships that mostly meant free products and discount codes. She could have sold and downsized. She would rather starve than look like she'd lost. So she offered me a deal. "Come home for a year," she said, eyes shiny, voice soft. "Help me stabilize. You'll save money. I'll save the house." It sounded reasonable. Temporary, I'd agreed because I was quiet, yes, but I wasn't naive. I'd asked for terms. I'd asked for numbers. I'd asked to see the mortgage statement and her bills. I'd asked to put my contributions in writing. She'd smiled like I was being dramatic. "You don't trust your own mother?" she'd said. I didn't argue then either. I drafted a simple agreement anyway, printed it out, and left it on the counter with a pen. It sat there for 3 days untouched. On the 4th day, she signed it without reading. The way people sign things when they assume they're always in control. That was my first receipt. Not because I was plotting, because I'd learned that in our family, the truth only mattered if it was documented. My mother was the kind of person who remembered conversations the way they benefited her. She spoke in a tone that made insults sound like concern. She corrected people publicly, then told them they were too sensitive. She loved the idea of family, not the work of it. At home, she treated me like staff. Outside, she introduced me as her sweet boy, who was taking some time to figure life out. At first, I thought it would irritate me more. It didn't. Irritation requires energy. I saved mine. I worked as an operations analyst for a mid-sized distribution company on the edge of town. My job was numbers and schedules and contracts, things that held up under scrutiny. I liked that. Data didn't change its story just because someone wanted it to. I worked from home most days. My mother loved telling people I was remote, as if it was a phase, like I was playing at adulthood. What she didn't tell anyone was that the remote job paid the mortgage, her car note, and the internet she used to stream her life to strangers. That part stayed off camera. The next time she said it out loud, it was louder, and there were more people. It happened at church. My mother didn't go for faith. She went for visibility. She volunteered on committees. She made casseroles when someone died and made sure her name was on the card. She hugged people longer than necessary. She spoke in a voice designed to carry. That Sunday was Family Appreciation Day. There were tables in the fellowship hall with paper tablecloths and bowls of mints. People wore pastels. Someone had set up a photo backdrop with a banner that said "Blessed beyond measure." My mother floated through the room, laughing a little too brightly. She wore pearl earrings that caught the overhead lights. She looked like the kind of woman people trusted. I stood beside her, holding her purse because she'd handed it to me without asking. That was how things worked. I carried back the Christmas. Our pastor, a man with a friendly face and a careful way of speaking, came over with his wife. They greeted my mother warmly. "And this must be your son," the pastor's wife said, smiling at me. "We don't see you often." I nodded. "Hi." My mother slipped her arm through mine like we were close. She did it for the audience. "Yes," she said with a laugh. "This is him. He's here." The pause was small but deliberate. "He keeps to himself," she added. "Always has," the pastor chuckled politely. Well, nothing wrong with a quiet spirit. My mother made a sound like agreement, but didn't accept it. She tilted her head toward me, smile still in place. "Sometimes I think he was switched at birth," she said, like she was sharing a harmless story. "I mean, honestly, look at me, and then look at him." A couple women nearby laughed. "You're good with money. You're good with money. You're good with money." Not because it was funny, because laughing was expected. Heat rose in my face, but my hands didn't move. My posture stayed steady. The pastor's wife looked uncomfortable for half a second, then smoothed it over. "He seems very kind." My mother's smile sharpened. "Kind," she repeated, tasting the word. "Sure, kind is nice. But you know," she leaned closer to the pastor's wife as if confiding, "as a mother, you have hopes, dreams." And sometimes she let the sentence trail off. I could have stepped away. I could have said, "That's enough." I could have embarrassed her right there, in front of the pastor and half the congregation. Instead, I shifted the purse strap higher on my shoulder and said nothing, because I'd learned something about my mother. In public, she wasn't really speaking to me. I was just the prop. She was speaking to the room, to the version of herself she wanted reflected back. A long-suffering mother, burdened with a disappointing child. Someone to pity. Someone to admire for enduring. And if I reacted, I'd give her exactly what she wanted. A story she could retell. I'd become proof of her patience. So I stayed still. She finished her little performance, laughed again, and moved on to someone else. When she did, the pastor's wife touched my arm lightly and said, "I'm sorry." It was quiet enough that nobody else heard. I looked at her. I kept my face calm. "It's okay," I said, but it wasn't okay. It just wasn't new. That afternoon back home, my mother posted pictures from church. In every photo, she looked radiant. In one, my shoulder was visible behind her like an accessory. Her caption read, "So grateful for family. Even when they drive you crazy, they're your blessing. You're good." Within minutes, people commented, "You're such a strong mama. Boys are so hard. God picked you for a reason." My mother liked every comment. At dinner, she was in a good mood. Validation always softened her edges. She ate slowly, checking her phone between bites. "I'm thinking," she said, not looking up, "I might do a video about adult children who don't launch." I speared a piece of chicken and chewed. "Okay," she glanced at me then, eyebrows raised. "You don't care?" "I'm eating," I said. My voice didn't change. That was important. Her eyes narrowed like she was searching for the reaction she couldn't find. "You know what your problem is?" she said. I took a sip of water. "What?" I asked. "You don't take things personally," she said, almost accusing. "It's like you don't even—" She waved her fork. "I don't know." "Feel." I set my glass down carefully. I didn't tell her that I felt plenty. I just didn't spill it all over her table. She scoffed and pushed her plate away. Then she said it, not softly, not as a joke. She leaned forward, voice suddenly sharp, carrying down the hallway as if she wanted the neighbors to hear through the walls. "You're not the child I ever wanted," she yelled. "You never were." The fork in my hand paused mid-air. The room went quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. My mother's chest rose and fell like she'd been waiting years to release the line, like she'd practiced it. For a second, I watched her face, the way her eyes shone, not with sadness, but with power, the way her mouth tightened, pleased with the impact she expected. She wanted me to break, to cry, to shout back, to beg. I swallowed my bite. I laid my fork down neatly beside my plate. Then I looked at her and said, "Okay, just one word, not agreement, not surrender, a marker." Her expression flickered. Confusion, then irritation. "Shh, shh, 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 shh. Excuse me," she snapped. I pushed my chair back slowly, the legs not scraping, because I lifted it slightly, the way I always did to keep the floors from getting damaged. I stood. I picked up my plate and carried it to the sink. Behind me, my mother's voice rose again. "That's it? That's all you have to say?" I rinsed the plate, set it in the dishwasher, closed it gently. Then I turned around. "Ha ha 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 ha! I didn't argue, I didn't defend myself." I didn't plead for love she had always used as leverage. I just met her eyes and said, "I heard you," and I walked out of the kitchen. Upstairs, I closed my bedroom door and sat at my desk. My laptop was open from work. The screen glowed with a spreadsheet of dates and numbers, deliveries, invoices, payment confirmations. I stared at it for a long time. Then I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it something plain. Home. Inside it, I created another folder. Receipts. I didn't do it with anger. I did it the way I did everything else, quietly, carefully, and all at once aware that I was going to need proof of what had been happening in this house. Downstairs, my mother was still talking, her voice rising and falling as she practiced being wronged. I didn't respond. I just opened my phone, scrolled to my call log, and tapped the record button on a voice memo app, testing it, not using it yet. Then I set the phone face down on my desk. And for the first time in a long time, I stopped hoping she would change. I started preparing for the day she would slip because she always did. And when she did, I planned to be ready without raising my voice even once. The house was quiet for a moment. Then my phone buzzed. A notification. My mother had tagged me in a post. I clicked it and saw my name attached to a smiling photo of her at church, captioned for hundreds of people to read. "Pray for me. Some children are just difficult." I stared at the screen, then set the phone down gently. I didn't argue. I just began to save everything. The folder stayed empty for 3 days. Not because there was nothing to put in it, because I was deciding what counted. I wasn't interested in hurt feelings, or tone, or memory. Those things dissolve the moment someone like my mother decides they never happened. I needed facts, things that didn't flinch when stared at. So I went on with my routine. I woke up at 6:10 a.m. every weekday, showered, made coffee, logged into work by 7. I paid bills on the first of the month, not because anyone asked me to, but because late fees made people careless. Carelessness creates noise. Noise invites scrutiny. My mother slept later and louder. She woke to notifications, not alarms. The first sound I usually heard from downstairs was her voice, already performing for someone. FaceTime, Instagram Live, voice notes she replayed twice before sending. She'd started calling the kitchen her studio. "Try not to walk through when I'm recording," she told me one morning, sipping a smoothie she'd posted about 5 minutes earlier. "It messes with the vibe." "I won't," I said. I adjusted my schedule instead, took calls from my room, ate lunch after she finished filming. She took that as compliance, not calculation. The more confident she got, the less careful she became. The first thing I saved wasn't dramatic. It was a screenshot. She'd posted a video titled "When Your Adult Child Still Lives at Home." The tone was playful, the lighting flattering. She laughed a lot. Her followers loved it. "People think it's easy," she said into the camera, shaking her head. "But when you're still supporting someone who refuses to launch, it's exhausting." I watched it once. Then again, at the bottom of the screen, the comments scrolled fast. "You're such a good mom for not kicking him out. Some kids just take advantage. Set boundaries." I took screenshots of the video, the caption, and the comments. Then I saved the posting date and the view count. Not because it hurt, because it was false. The mortgage payment came out of my account that same day. $1,846.23. I saved that, too. My mother never asked how work was. She asked how long I'd be on calls. She never asked what I needed. She asked what time I'd be home if I stepped out. When she talked about me, she spoke like I wasn't in the room. When she spoke to me, it was in directives. "Take the trash out before noon. Don't park there, it looks messy. You should really wear something nicer if you're going to be seen." She loved being seen. That Saturday, she hosted a brunch. I found out Friday night. "I'm having a few people over tomorrow," she said, already halfway up the stairs. "So make sure your room's door stays closed." "How many?" I asked. She shrugged. "Oh, you know, some friends." "You're good with money." "A couple from church. Maybe Ken's sister." "Ken's sister." I nodded. "Okay." I woke early anyway. Cleaned the downstairs bathroom, mopped the kitchen floor, wiped the counters. I did it automatically, like muscle memory. By 10, the house smelled like citrus cleaner and coffee. By 10:30, people arrived. My mother floated from group to group, laughter pitched just high enough to carry. She wore linen and confidence. She introduced everyone to everyone else, always circling back to herself. I stayed mostly invisible, refilling drinks, clearing plates. When people thanked me, she smiled and said, "Oh, he's helpful." Helpful, like a trait, not a person. Ken's sister, Lynn, cornered me near the hallway. "You're still here," she said, not unkindly. Curious. "Yes," I said. She nodded slowly. "Your mother says you're finding your way." I met her eyes. I work full time. Aww. Her eyebrows lifted. "Doing what?" I told her. She listened carefully, asked questions my mother never did. When I mentioned I handled budgeting and vendor contracts, something shifted in her expression. "Huh," she said. "That's substantial." My mother appeared instantly, like she'd sensed the imbalance. "Lynn," she said brightly, "there you are." "Isn't he just so quiet?" Lynn glanced between us. "He seems capable," my mother laughed. "Well, that's one word for it." I excused myself before either of them could continue. In my room, I opened my laptop and checked my bank account. The brunch groceries had been charged to my card, $312.47. I stared at the transaction, then pulled up the agreement we'd signed 2 years earlier. The terms were clear. I covered mortgage, utilities, and shared groceries within reason. Posting costs were excluded unless agreed upon in advance. I hadn't agreed. I saved the receipt. That night, after everyone left and my mother basked in the afterglow of attention, she knocked on my door without waiting for an answer. "You embarrassed me today," she said. I looked up from my screen. "How?" "You made Lynn think I was exaggerating," she said, "talking about work like that." I answered her questions. "You didn't have to go into detail," she snapped. "It makes it seem like I'm lying." I considered that. "Are you?" Her mouth opened, then closed. She scoffed. "You're impossible!" She walked away. I added the brunch charge to the folder. The next week, something shifted. My mother got a call in the middle of the afternoon. I heard her voice through the vent, sharp and clipped. When she hung up, she slammed a cabinet door. That night, she was quiet at dinner, distracted. Her phone stayed face down for once. "Everything okay?" I asked. She glanced at me suspicious. "Why? No reason." She exhaled. "Ken's being difficult again." I didn't ask. Ken had been gone long enough to become a convenient villain.
"They're auditing something," she said.
From when we were still married. Some joint account nonsense. I nodded. "Okay." She watched me closely. "You don't need to worry about it." I wasn't. Her eyes narrowed, then she waved a hand. "Anyway, I might need you to increase your contribution for a bit, just until things settle." "How much?" I asked. She hesitated. "We'll see. I need a number." She frowned. "Why are you being like this?" "Because I need a number." She stared at me, then smiled thinly. "You're still living here." "Yes," I said, per the agreement. Her smile dropped. "I'm your mother," she said. "I shouldn't need paperwork to get support." I held her gaze. "I agree, but here we are." She looked away first. "I'll think about it," she muttered. That night, I updated the folder again. Timeline. Dates? Notes? Not accusations. Just facts. 2 days later, an envelope arrived in the mail, addressed to my mother. She left it on the counter, unopened, like she wanted someone to ask about it. I didn't. That evening, she poured herself a glass of wine and sat across from me. "They're claiming I owe back taxes," she said, "from sponsorship income." I waited. "They say I didn't report some things correctly." I nodded. "Okay." Her fingers tightened around the glass. "I might need help." "With what?" I asked. "Money," she said flatly. "Just temporarily." "How much?" She hesitated again. "A few thousand." I opened my laptop. "How much exactly?" She bristled. "Why are you interrogating me? I need to know what I'm agreeing to." She laughed bitterly. "This is unbelievable. No one ever saw her after everything I've done for you." I closed the laptop. "If you want help, I need details." She stared at me for a long moment. Then she stood abruptly. "Forget it," she said. "I'll handle it myself." She stormed upstairs. The next morning, I checked my email. There was a notification from my bank. A failed transfer attempt. Someone had tried to move $4,500 from my savings account. I stared at the screen. The attempt had been made at 2:14 a.m. I opened the account activity. The login location was listed. The IP address matched our home network. I didn't feel angry. I felt clear. I pulled up the security log and saved it. Then I checked my credit report. Nothing new. Yet. That afternoon, while my mother was out filming content at a friend's house, I logged into the shared household email account, the one she insisted on using for family stuff. Buried in the inbox was a thread from 6 months earlier. Subject line: "Payment arrangement, final notice." It was from a tax consultant. Attached were PDFs. My mother hadn't just underreported income. She'd been moving sponsorship payments through an account she'd opened in my name 3 years ago, when I'd still trusted her with paperwork. I opened the document slowly. There it was. My name. My SSN. Deposits. Withdrawals. Transfers. Thousands of dollars! Income I'd never seen. Income she'd posted about spending. My hand stayed steady as I scrolled. At the bottom of the thread was her reply. "My son is aware and has agreed to this arrangement." The timestamp made my stomach go still. Because on that date, I'd been out of state for work. I had proof of that too. I sat back in my chair. Then I did something very simple. I saved everything. Every email, every attachment, every timestamp. I cross-referenced the dates with my calendar, my travel receipts, my bank statements. The story they told was clean, consistent, and not mine. I closed the laptop and looked around my room. The quiet, the closed door, the neutral walls. She never decorated. Downstairs, the front door opened and closed. My mother was home. I didn't go down, I just added a new subfolder under receipts and named it carefully, Key Documents, because now I understood the shape of what she'd been building, and more importantly, what she'd been willing to put in my name. I leaned back, exhaled once, and waited, she thought. She still had control. She thought I was still just helpful, and she had no idea what she'd already given me. After I found the account, I stopped doing extra things, not out of spite, out of clarity. I still paid the mortgage, still covered utilities, still cleaned shared spaces, but I no longer smoothed edges. She dulled herself. I didn't fix her mistakes quietly. I didn't absorb her stress, I observed. That change unsettled her more than anger ever would have. She started watching me, the way people do when they sense something shifting but can't locate it. Asking questions that sounded casual but weren't. You've been working late? Who were you on the phone with? Why are you so distant lately? I answered honestly and briefly, yes. A client. I'm fine. She mistook my calm for withdrawal. She didn't realize it was alignment. The audit deadline loomed. Letters came more frequently now, thicker envelopes, firmer language. She opened them in the kitchen where I could see, sighing loudly, shaking her head, making sure I noticed the weight she was carrying. I don't know how I'm supposed to handle all this alone, she said one evening, voice heavy. I looked up from my laptop. Do you want help understanding it? She scoffed. You wouldn't understand. I didn't argue. 2 days later, she announced a dinner. Not just any dinner, a family dinner. She stood at the bottom of the stairs and projected upward, knowing I could hear her. I think it's time we all sit down and clear the air, she said. Too much distance isn't healthy. I closed my laptop and went downstairs. She was leaning against the counter, arms crossed, already rehearsing. Who's coming? I asked. She smiled. Your Aunt Rochelle, Maris, Lynn, Pastor James and his wife, a few close friends. I nodded. When? Next Friday, she said. I want everyone to see we're fine. There it was. You're good with money. Not resolution, presentation. She wanted witnesses. She just didn't know what kind. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not because I was anxious, but because I was mapping. I pulled every document into a single timeline. Dates, amounts, locations. I labeled everything neutrally. No accusations, just sequence. I printed copies, 2 sets. I also emailed a local CPA, not one she'd ever worked with. I attached the documents and asked one question. Can you confirm whether this exposes me to liability? He replied the next morning. Yes! One word, clear, unemotional. I thanked him and asked if he'd be willing to attend a meeting as a neutral advisor if needed. I didn't mention my mother. I didn't mention dinner. He said yes. I didn't tell my mother any of this. She spent the week preparing like it was an event. She deep cleaned the house, ordering me out of shared spaces while she staged. She rehearsed speeches out loud, little monologues about family being imperfect but loving. She practiced smiling in the mirror. She also slipped. The stress made her sloppy. One afternoon, while she was live streaming from the living room, she mentioned me by name. Some kids don't realize how much their parents sacrifice, she said to the camera. I've carried financial burdens I never should have had to. I clipped the video, saved it. That same day, I got an alert from my credit monitoring service, a soft inquiry. Someone had attempted to increase the credit limit on the account tied to the fraudulent income. I called the issuer immediately. Froze everything, documented the call. The representative asked if I wanted to report identity misuse. Not yet, I said, but note that I flagged it today.
She did, receipt, and then...
Friday came quietly. The house filled slowly. Coats piled on the bed in the guest room. Laughter echoed in places that usually stayed silent. My mother moved through it all like a host who believed applause was inevitable. She hugged people tightly, complimented outfits, played music just loud enough to feel intentional. When dinner was served, she insisted we all sit together. She took the head of the table. I sat where I always did, halfway down, within view of everyone. She raised her glass. "I just want to say how grateful I am," she began, voice warm, practiced. "Family is complicated, but love means showing up, even when it's hard." People nodded. Some murmured agreement. She turned toward me then, smiled gentle, eyes sharp. "And I'm especially grateful for my son," she said. "Who's still finding his way. It hasn't been easy, but I've done my best." The table went quiet. She waited. For me to deflect, to joke, to reassure her image. I didn't. I met her eyes calmly. "Thank you for saying that," I said. Her smile twitched. Dinner continued, but the energy shifted. Conversation stumbled, then recovered. My mother kept glancing at me like she was waiting for something to go wrong. Halfway through dessert, she stood again. "I actually wanted to share something," she said, laughing lightly. Since we're all here, my pulse stayed even. She reached into a folder she'd placed beside her chair and pulled out a stack of papers. "I've been under a lot of stress lately," she said, "financially, and I think it's important to be transparent with family." She slid the papers onto the table. "They're saying we owe money," she said, emphasis subtle but deliberate, "because of income that wasn't handled properly." Several heads turned toward me. She sighed. "I've tried to manage it quietly, but I can't do it alone anymore." There it was, the setup. I waited. She looked at me expectantly. "Do you want to explain?" I reached into my bag and pulled out my own folder. Identical thickness, cleaner tabs. "I can," I said evenly, "but first I'd like to clarify something." The room stilled. "I didn't know this dinner was about finances," I continued, "so I invited someone to join us remotely, just to make sure facts are clear." Her eyes widened. "What?" I opened my laptop and turned it toward the table. The screen lit up with a waiting video call. The CPA's name was visible. "I won't say anything yet," I added. "I think it's important everyone sees the documents first." My mother's hand tightened around her wine glass. "You're being dramatic," she snapped. "This is family." I nodded. "Exactly." I slid my folder forward, aligning it neatly with hers. "Before anyone reacts," I said calmly, "I want to make sure we're all looking at the same information. No accusations, no raised voice, just paper, dates, names." The CPA joined the call. I clicked on mute. And for the first time all evening, my mother didn't speak. She just stared at the screen, realizing, too late, that the room she'd staged so carefully was no longer hers to control. "I didn't rush." Silence has weight when it's deliberate. The CPA introduced himself, his voice steady through the laptop speakers. He explained his role plainly. Licensed, independent, here to review documents, not take sides. My mother tried to laugh it off. "This is ridiculous," she said, waving a hand. "We're just talking things through." He nodded once. "That's exactly what we're doing." I slid the first document forward, not toward him, toward the table. "This is the account statement," I said. "Opened 3 years ago, in my name." Aunt Rochelle leaned in. Lynn did too. Pastor James adjusted his glasses. My mother shook her head sharply. "You told me about that. You agreed." "I didn't," I said calmly. "And we'll get to that." I turned the laptop so everyone could see the screen. "Here's the timeline," I continued. "Deposits from sponsorships, withdrawals for personal expenses. None of the income was transferred to me. None was reported on my returns." The CPA nodded. "That matches what I reviewed." My mother stood up. "You're twisting things. He's always been dramatic." I didn't respond to her. Instead, I pulled out the email thread. "This is from 6 months ago," I said. "Sent while I was in Chicago for work." I paused. My travel receipts are included. I let that settle before reading the line aloud. "My son is aware and has agreed to this arrangement." The room went still. Lynn's mouth tightened. "You wrote that?" My mother's face flushed. I was under pressure. The CPA spoke again. "For clarity, stating consent that doesn't exist, especially in writing, creates exposure for both parties." "Both!" Rochelle asked.
Yes, he said.
But intent matters, and documentation. I slid the next page forward. This is the failed transfer attempt, I said, from my savings 2 weeks ago, from this house's IP address. My mother stared at the papers like they'd betrayed her. I was going to tell you, she said weakly. When? She opened her mouth. Closed it. I didn't press. I didn't need to! The CPA cleared his throat. Based on what I've reviewed, responsibility for the unreported income lies with the individual who earned and controlled it, not the account holder, provided corrective action is taken promptly. My mother sank back into her chair. Pastor James spoke carefully. Is there legal risk? There was, the CPA said. It's been mitigated as of this afternoon. Every head turned to me. I filed a formal notice with the bank, I said. Froze the account. Flagged misuse. Provided documentation. My mother looked up sharply. You what? I protected myself, I said. My voice didn't waver. I also notified the tax consultant listed in these emails that I did not consent and would not be participating further. The CPA nodded. Which is appropriate. My mother's carefully built composure cracked. So you're just going to ruin me? She said, voice trembling. After everything I've done for you? I waited a beat before answering. I'm not doing anything to you, I said. I'm stopping something you were doing to me. No one laughed. No one defended her. The consequences didn't arrive loudly. They arrived precisely. Rochelle pushed her chair back slightly, distance forming. Mara stared at the table, no longer amused. Lynn folded her arms. Disappointment etched deep. Pastor James exhaled slowly. We should probably talk privately about next steps, the CPA added. I'll follow up with written recommendations.
My mother didn't argue. She didn't perform.
She just looked smaller. When the guests began to leave, the energy was subdued, polite, careful. Lynn paused by me at the door. I'm glad you spoke, she said quietly. I nodded. So am I. After the door closed behind the last car, the house felt different, not empty, clear. My mother stood in the living room, arms wrapped around herself. You planned this, she said. Yes, I replied. She scoffed weakly. You waited. You let me look stupid. I shook my head. You chose the audience. That landed. She sat on the couch like she wasn't sure it would hold her. What happens now? She asked. I took a breath, not to steady myself, to mark the moment. I'll be moving out, I said. 30 days. Her head snapped up. You can't just... I can, I said. And I will. I pulled out one final document. This is a termination of the agreement, I said, placing it on the table. Effective in 30 days. Mortgage payments covered through then. She stared at it. You're abandoning me. I didn't correct her. I just clarified. I'm ending financial involvement, I said. I'm also separating my name from anything that isn't mine. She swallowed. And after that? After that, I said, we'll see what kind of relationship is possible without money.
Without image management, she laughed once brittle.
You think I need you? I met her gaze evenly. No.
I think you needed control.
That night, I packed quietly. Not everything, just essentials. The next morning, I went to work like normal. The spreadsheet on my screen felt familiar. Honest! Over the next weeks, consequences unfolded without my involvement. The sponsorships paused for review. The tax consultant required a repayment plan in her name. The church grew quieter. Invitations slowed. She tried once, only once, to post about betrayal. The comments didn't land the way they used to. People asked questions. I never responded. On my last day in the house, I cleaned my room, left it empty, neutral. I taped an envelope to the kitchen counter. Inside were copies of documents she'd need. No notes, no commentary. At the bottom, one sentence. Please communicate through email going forward. I left my key on the counter and walked out. My new apartment was small, clean, mine. The first night, I sat on the floor with a takeout container and ate slowly. No commentary. No cameras, no audience. Just quiet. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt settled. Weeks later, my mother emailed.
Short, careful.
Different. I understand if you need space. I hope someday we can talk. I read it once, then archived it. Boundaries aren't punishments. They're clarity. And for the first time in my life, everything was exactly where it belonged, including